All right, welcome to a Soccer Pub edition of Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher. Today we're going to do a deep dive into Man City Arsenal, attack it from all angles, and then we'll tackle the rest of the Premier League week as well. So let's welcome in the two Robbies, Earle and Mustoe. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. A little bit of spice has come out of this one, I think, with Arsenal stuttering a little bit, keeping on coughing up 2-goal leads or going down to Southampton and having to battle back. And as it stands with the odds, Man City are a minus 180 favourite to win on Wednesday. Arsenal plus 450 to get 3 points. So the market thinks they're less than a 20% chance. Let's start with you, Robbie Earle. Are you surprised that the Gunners are such a big underdog here, or do you think it's warranted given their recent slip-ups?
I'd have to say probably not that surprised when you think the last 3 games have ended in draws. 2 games they were up and should have maybe seen the job off, certainly at West Ham. And then, as you say, going into Southampton, I think we all thought Southampton was a game to prepare Arsenal for what they're going to get at the Etihad. A City team that just seemed to have so many strengths and options and dimensions and informed players at the moment. So we all thought, a nice 2-3, 4-0 win against Southampton, but wasn't the case. And I always feel that Arsenal are just being tested now in an area, in a way that we weren't sure how they were going to react. It's their first big rodeo at the top of the table for many of the players, for the manager. It's the first time I feel all season that they're feeling Manchester City breathing down their necks. It's a Arsenal team that's lost its natural rhythm and its groove of playing. And all that comes a consequence of the pressure that Manchester City can exert, the quality that Manchester City have, the experience that going down the track. And so for those reasons, I can see why City are clear favourites. And it's all Arsenal have it all on to win the game now at the Etihad.
Yeah. And I think the thing is that Arsenal, they keep scoring okay. Yeah. Put 2 by Liverpool, 2 by West Ham, 3 by Southampton, and really could have had 4 or 5. But it's the defence that has really slipped up. And Aaron Ramsdale, who was, I think, heroic against Liverpool and saved them in that game from losing outright, obviously has the howler against Southampton. But it just seems like the fact that Saliba is out at the moment, having to rely on Rob Holding. Meanwhile, Man City, they're starting 5 different guys who played centre-back at the World Cup. So they've got 5 centre-backs. Arsenal looks like they've got 1 at the moment. Robbie Mustoe, do you think that it is just a problem with the defence and the lack of depth is catching up to them, or do you think that there are other issues going on?
I think it's definitely a little bit of the lack of depth. William Saliba has been one of these stories for Arsenal this season, and bringing him back he's been out on loan a few times, has been sensational. And we've talked about it, I always think that, with your star players, you can get away with it over 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. But after that, you start to see the reason why others have preferred to, in this case, Rob Holding. So that's not surprised me. I have still been surprised, though, by just some of the mistakes. These are basic mistakes. And this is why it's got to be so painful for Arsenal. It's not as though, they've been played off the park a few times. They haven't quite found their rhythm. They've made such basic errors that have led to goals that makes it so difficult to try and win games. I think we all know that They've got great attacking players, particularly in the wide areas, and Martinelli and Saka, some of the best in the league. But when you make basic mistakes, it's going to hurt you. And I think back to Rob's point, our job is to sort of discuss why. Why are they making mistakes? Why is it happening? And you got to look at the situation of pressure. And, again, Arsenal, I remember saying in the studio a few times, they're automatic at the moment. They're just going out there, playing their football exactly the same way. But when the mind starts to take over, that automatic nature of the game goes away a little bit. I think we've seen that with the way that they've played. Some of the rhythm hasn't been there. The mistakes have been there as well. All that being said, I still think they got a better than 20% chance, Jay. If you do put a lot of stock on those mistakes, if they don't make mistakes, if Gabriel defends properly, if Ramsdale doesn't try and force a pass through in a very difficult situation, if Thomas Partey focuses on keeping the ball instead of making mistakes, then you have to learn to look at their attacking players, what they can do going forward. And in some ways, given the last week or two, have they got, I don't want to say nothing to lose, but I think the expectation is now that they've given this away and they've blown it in some ways. This is a chance on Wednesday to change everything.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because I think for the past couple of months, Arsenal fans would have penciled or circled this fixture thinking, let's just get a point. We just get a point, then we'll be right. That's no longer the case. They need to win this match now, I think, to win the title. And, to your point, it's just these mistakes, whether it's the Ramsdale howler against Southampton, whether it's Thomas Partey with the ill-advised flick past Declan Rice that didn't go past Declan Rice against West Ham, whether it's even Tomiyasu's back pass the first time that these two teams played, leading to the opening goal for Kevin De Bruyne. So, Robbie Earle, do you think that City are just the far superior team at the moment? Do you think that, this iteration is superior to previous versions that we've seen of City, or do you think they might be vulnerable?
Probably not what Arsenal fans want to hear, but in terms of where City are, I think you've touched on it already, Jay, the centre-back position. I mean, he basically is playing with 4 centre-backs and Rodri in front of him, which is a 5, which is a real attention to defence. Now, Robbie Mustoe and I turned back to the days when Pep first came to the Premier League, and it was almost like it wasn't about defending. He said he once said, "I never train defending and tackling. We don't need to do those things." And maybe it's something that over the course of time, maybe it's part Premier League, certainly Champions League, it's something that's dogged them a little bit and caused them problems. So when you look at Manchester City's base of that back 4, which actually turns into 3 when Stones drops into midfield, which is another issue that opposition fans have. But that back 3/4 with Rodri as a base, and then you talk about what goes forward. I mean, the De Bruynes, the Bernardo Silvas, the Gundogan's, and then they also got wide players who can destroy you. If it's not Foden and Grealish, it's Mahrez and it's maybe Bernardo Silva in the wide areas. And on top of that, we put a 32-goal freak at the top of the pitch. I mean, those are all the strengths that Manchester City have that you have to deal with. So from Arsenal's point of view, the only thing I would say with 6 or 7 games left in the season, there's one more wrinkle in this season. There's one more little twist somewhere, and I'm not quite sure where it is and where it comes. Now, if Arsenal can go to the Etihad and win and change the narrative and take back some control of the league, so you get the points, but more than the points, you get the power back and you get the position right now. We need to win out. We all know the Newcastle away game is one, maybe Chelsea home, not as difficult as it's been. But if they can go to the Etihad and win, it still just puts a little bit of pressure back onto Manchester City side of the plate. So, I mean, that's got to be the ultimate test now. Can they go to the Etihad? Can they be clean? Can they not make mistakes? Can they deal with all that City have and get back to their own groove and win the game? Because if they win the game, they grab back control of the Premier League.
Just thinking there, Rob, and like Mikel Arteta's biggest, few days now to try and reinstall, Jay, the belief and the confidence. I would just be a little worried if that belief in the superb nature of their football has just been taking a bit of a dent with these last few weeks. Because if something goes wrong, Rob, if they concede a goal early or something, would we see Arsenal deflate and heads down a little bit, given, which we wouldn't have done, by the way, 3 or 4 weeks ago before these recent matches. But I just wonder if they've just lost that little bit of belief and confidence that going into this game, they got to find again.
Yeah, and if you were an Arsenal fan, as I am, as you can see with the old school Cesc Fabregas jersey behind me, I would take a little bit of heart from the fact that in the first matchup between these two teams, I thought Arsenal largely controlled the game in the first half, and then it started to get away from them after Pep stopped messing around with Bernardo Silva fullback, brought on Ake, and then it turned a little bit. But Robbie Mustoe, do you think that? How do you think this game is going to unfold? Do you think that it's going to be a defensive struggle, or do you think it might be free-flowing and open with lots of goals?
I think it'll be open. And I think it will be a toe-to-toe situation. But to follow on the point that Robbie Earle made, the way that they've got their back line better now, more insurance, more defensive focus, that's got to help them. It's absolutely helping them in the Champions League. And this is the first time that I absolutely believe they're going to win that competition, given how they've changed a little bit with John Stones. You got 5 players there basically that are focused on defending. Nathan Ake is another one. That's not a Cancelo. It's not some Bernardo Silva, to your point. So I'd be surprised. But to be fair, we've been surprised before with Pep, and he chucks in something different, and he's been accused of overthinking it a little bit, particularly in the Champions League. I just wonder if there's one more wrinkle, Robbie, or like one more thing that he might do. He knows that Arteta knows him inside and out. They play a very similar system and a setup with the way that they're doing things, with bringing a defender into midfield. Zinchenko does it for Arsenal. I wouldn't expect to see Pep do anything change-wise, but I've been wrong on that many times. So back to your point, Jay, we won't know. I would be really surprised if anything changes tactically. Left field here, like Spurs changed that recent game against Newcastle United, where they went, wow, a totally different system. But that's something that Pep, you can never read him. He might throw in something different.
Yep, looking forward to seeing Kevin De Bruyne at centre back and
Haaland in goal.
Yeah, exactly, Haaland in goal. Well, game's going to be Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern on Peacock. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me. Can you tell me what you're working on this week and where to follow you?
Yeah, well, we'll be in studio on Wednesday. The huge game, people are saying the biggest game of the season, the possible, title deciders. So we'll be working on the games this week, all through the midweek. But we have a podcast. We'll do a podcast after Wednesday night, just because of the enormity of what it could mean for both these clubs. So look out for the Two Robbies podcast on anywhere you download your podcast. We'll be doing a really deep dive into those games and all the other games. At the moment, there's lots of relegation struggles around. Thursday, I think Spurs host Manchester United after that debacle up at St. James's Park. So wherever you look, these stories in the Premier League, and wherever the stories are, me and Mr. Mustoe will follow.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, gentlemen, and look forward to following the Two Robbies podcast, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Jay.
Cheers. All right. Before we bring in Scott Willis and Drew Dinsick, a reminder to download the RotoWorld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in the App Store today. All right. Let's bring in Scott Willis and Drew Dinsick now. Continue to break down the game. Scott, thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah,
Drew,
thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us, well, mate. Let's get straight into it. I want to talk about Arsenal's defence, firstly, which has been the cause for concern, shipping 7 goals in the past 3 games. The total in this one is the 2.5 total. It's backed -170, the over. Scott, do you think it will be high scoring, and do you think Arsenal might be able to shore things up?
Yeah, actually, I think it probably will be high scoring. When I was running the simulation for the match this morning, I have the most likely outcome of this match, a 2-1 to Manchester City, but there's lots of 2-1s, 2-2s, 3-1s, 3-2s that kind of pop up there. So I do think that there's going to be goals in this. Like you said, right, Arsenal's defensive record right now has not been great. I guess the one positive side for Arsenal right now is they've backed it up with continued goal scoring on their own. So the actual goal difference for the team has maintained a very strong level. But I know there's lots of concern within the Arsenal fandom right now about how many goals are being allowed.
Do you have a read on the availability of some of these guys or do you think that it matters? Xhaka, of course, missed on over the weekend with illness. He's questionable by all the looks of it. Would you expect him to go? And do you think that moves the number one way or the other?
I do think he should be available. I mean, illness generally should hopefully be something that's, passed by this time. It does look like Saliba is out. David Ornstein is reporting this morning that he is very much looking like he's in doubt for the rest of the season. So that one is the one that really hurts. I think Xhaka getting in here could help, solidify some of the build-up, being able to get more control in the game. I think that's something that has really affected Arsenal over the last 3 matches. We've seen, key parts of the team be out. So we had the Zinchenko absence versus West Ham, and I think that was something that really hurt the team when they were able to go 2 goals up there, to not be able to kind of put the foot on the ball and control things a little bit more, letting West Ham back into the game. Xhaka, I think, really was someone that's missed, over the weekend, or actually on Friday, being able to just really kind of be able to exert the game. I know, we went down early in that match, but I think, having Xhaka in there just gives a little bit more of a presence in midfield, being able to do it. I know one of the things that Arsenal fans are all doing right now is I think everybody's going through the different permutations for how do you put together a lineup right now, trying to get the best team on the field. And I know I've done it probably like 4 or 5 different ones, and I don't think I like any of them, with all the different ways that you could try to line up. But so it's probably going to be a pick the best of a bad situation kind of thing right now.
Yeah, and I think the issue is that when Arsenal have guys go down, it's Fabio Vieira coming in. When City have guys go down, it's Phil Foden or Riyad Mahrez and Jack Grealish, etc., coming in. So I think that depth, which has been the knock on Arsenal all season, and why they started the season 50-1 to win the title, I think that is starting to rear its head. How bad, Scott, do you think this Arsenal slide is? Or do you think it's a little bit overblown? They really should have beaten Southampton by expected goals. They dominated that matchup. They really could have scored late at the death with Trossard and then Reece Nelson just barely missing. Do you think it's a little bit overblown, this Arsenal kind of semi-crisis, or do you think it's warranted?
I think kind of both, right? So, like, when you look at the actual results, like, that really does warrant like freaking out, because getting 3 points from those 3 games is really tough. I think, if you kind of think about what you had expected, but if we were talking about before the trip to Anfield, I think people would have said we need somewhere between 4 and 6 points between these matches, and only getting 3 when it really felt like all 9 were potentially there. And to a certain extent, like I think 5 or 6 points would have been very fair for the performances that Arsenal ultimately put out there. It is very tough. But again, like, then there's the silver lining of the performances were there to actually get the points that, the team could have put themselves in a better position. So yeah, where we are in the table is certainly a cause for crisis. We've seen Arsenal drop from just under like 55-60% to win the title to, I think, now you're somewhere between 1-4 and 1-3 kind of a thing. So it's a really big slip in these 3 matches. So yeah, even though we're still unbeaten, I think in the last 10, it's these 3 draws in a row when you have the well-oiled Terminator team chasing you down. It never feels good.
Yeah. There's a bit of a T1000 vibe for Erling Haaland, which is very crook. Last one for you from me, Scott. Just because it's been a bit of a grim 17 minutes of Arsenal. I just want to talk about how bad Tottenham were.
Oh yeah,
a little bit of respite. I mean, that was about the worst performance, I think, relative to talent in the Premier League I've ever seen. The first 20 minutes against Newcastle. I guess what do you make of this Tottenham collapse? Is it about the personnel? Is it purely about the system going to the back 4? Or I guess this Tottenham team, a lot of people were, tipping them to finish second in the league before the season. And the Conte situation was just a debacle, and now it's a new debacle. I guess, what do you make of Tottenham's season overall?
I mean, I don't know. I've just been accused of being a closeted Tottenham fan because, during the run-in last year, I was the person who was talking up like, no, this team is actually good, and Conte has turned them around. So I did rate Tottenham highly at the beginning of the season, at the end of last year, but it really does feel that you see Son kind of feel like the age cliff is being able to not be able to recreate what he's able to do at the end of last year. The match against Newcastle, there's been some good memories for Arsenal fans, and getting St. Totteringham's Day with big Newcastle results. I was reminded back to the 5-1 from 2015-16, and this one kind of brought back some good memories of those kinds of things, added a nice silver lining to the list. You saw, like, this was not a team that you'd expect to be a back 4. I think it's kind of like a fireable offense to put those 2 fullbacks and a back 4. I don't think Eric Dyer can do back 4 center backing anymore. And I think that was the thing that really just made it so easy for Newcastle to be able to get in there.
I agree with all of that in general. And the Tottenham, the 5 goals in 20 minutes, it felt like somebody was playing a prank like this, like that was intentional to a degree. But whatever the case is, that was pretty ridiculous. Do you have a read on sort of the other kind of interesting betting market going here as we come down the home stretch of who will ultimately get relegated? You got a top three that you think are most likely?
Maybe pull it up here. So I know for the top four, I've been kind of back in, Liverpool to get in there. So I still think that if I was to, place a speculative bet, that might be the one that I would take for, a top four to maybe see if they could squeeze ahead of Manchester United, who I'm not sure I still fully believe in. I think my bottom three, it's very tight, but I think Everton, Forest, Southampton right now is kind of my three. If I had to pick, I feel like some of the teams, Crystal Palace, West Ham, have kind of pulled themselves away from the rest of the pack. I still think Wolves, Leicester are still in a bit of trouble. There's still a lot to be decided down there, and I think that's actually one of the more interesting areas now that the top four seems to be sort of resolving itself.
Yeah. I think Leeds are the one I would be watching just in terms of their current catastrophe. And I think as well that, manager changes tend to throw up a little bit more variance. And I'm not sure that the market necessarily is capturing how bad teams like Tottenham, Leeds, Chelsea are at the moment. So I think they're the team that I agree that definitely the three most likely are Southampton, Forest, and Everton. But I would say that Leeds are probably the one who could get sucked into that as well. Scott, thanks so much for joining us. Can you let people know where to follow you on social media and what you're working on?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter, Scott J. Willis. If you want to subscribe to the content I write at cannonstats.com. A lot of the stuff this week is going to be looking ahead to Manchester City and the different permutations of what that result can do for the title race, because it's a true 6-pointer title decider type thing. A win here could put Arsenal in a good spot. A loss here basically ends the season. The draw keeps hope alive, but it's still not the best result.
Yeah, it's a weird one because Arsenal, they were pretty material dogs to make the top four, and now they're going to, at worst finish second, and it's going to feel like a disaster. But at the same time, it's been a great season overall, and hopefully for Arsenal fans, I think also for the neutral, it's going to be a lot more interesting if Arsenal win that game or at least get a point to keep the suspense going. All right, thank you so much for your time, Scott, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Cheers. All right, before we get to our best bets of the Premier League week, every season is draft season. Drew, get your Rotoworld Draft Guide bundle today and dominate your basketball drafts packed with profiles. Plus, use promo code BUNDLE5 and save an extra $5 at checkout. All right, Dinsick, what's your best bet? You going back to the Crystal Palace well or not?
I like Crystal Palace, but gotta find a new angle as they weirdly let me down against Everton. Should have won that one. Not exactly sure, other than they were just kind of resting on their laurels that they saved their season. I think they bring a more focused effort on Tuesday, but the side I like even better on Tuesday is Leicester. Leicester's taking on Leeds. The aforementioned Leeds, if it bleeds, it leads. We are expecting Leeds to slide into this bottom three. I think realistically they are going to make it into the mix to be relegated. I give Everton credit for fighting really hard. The 3 draws they've gotten in their last 5 were all very hard fought draws. That team is not quitting. Meanwhile, Leeds, I just don't really know what they have going for them. Like the loss to Fulham was a mess. And that was the final was 2-1. Felt like it could have been about 4-1. Meanwhile, I think Leicester has enough talent and really is in a dire enough position that every adjustment that they have that they can throw against the wall here to get an away win, would be expected. They have more roster flexibility. They have more, just in general, a better statistical profile in every possible way that would match up for this particular head to head. So yeah, Leicester draw no bet plus 125. Get a little Foxes on Tuesday.
Yep, I like it. I think Leicester will win that game. At some point, the talent has to come to the fore. Yep. They've left it pretty late, but it can still come to the fore. My best bet, Arsenal, correct score 4-0, 220 to 1. It's actually Brentford again. Brentford draw no bet, plus 280 at Stamford Bridge going to Chelsea. I think that Chelsea are the most difficult team in the league to price. The market keeps on expecting regression. I think this team is just a disaster at the moment. And what they put up against Brighton last time out, they got absolutely battered in that game against Brighton. That scoreline flattered them and they lost. They should have lost by more. I think Brentford, even though Brentford only have 1 point from their past 3 matches, and they burnt me against Aston Villa in a game they absolutely should have won. They've won all of their past 3 matches on expected goals. I think that they can absolutely beat Chelsea. Brentford's still pushing for a European spot. Chelsea, they've got nothing left on any front. This is just the disaster of a team. And I think that there is some downward variance with Chelsea where the market may not necessarily be capturing just how much of a disaster this team is. So I will take the Bees. Again. Yeah, plus 280, draw no bet.
Nice.
That's my play. Yeah, they get it done. All right. Don't forget to check out NBCSportsEdge.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to all of our guests, Scott Willis, the 2 Robbies, Mustoe and Earle. Thank you to you, Drew Dinsick. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, don't forget to rate, and subscribe us from Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick. We'll be back tomorrow.